morning, and welcome to our second episode of Community Matters, matters that matter to you. Today's topic is learning in a COVID world, and I am joined today by experts from both the Valley View School District as well as the Plainfield School District. First is Rachel Kender, who is the superintendent of the Valley View School District. This is her first year as superintendent, and what a year it's been.
It's definitely been a year.
She was previously the assistant superintendent for the Valley View School District for 9 years. Valley View School District has 21 schools, and they serve 16,000 students from pre-K through 12th grade with approximately 2,600 total staff members. Rachel, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And she's also joined by Dr. Jason Pascavage, who is the Bolingbrook High School principal. Also with us this morning is Dr. Lane April, who is the superintendent of Psd 202. He's been in his position for the past 8 years, but has served as superintendent for 15 overall. Psd has a total of Psd 202 has a total of 30 schools with 25,000 students and 2,900 staff members. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mary. It's great to be with you and the viewers today.
Great, thank you. He is also joined by Dr. Glenn Wood, who's the Associate Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. Remember, you can also join this conversation by commenting on Facebook anytime throughout the broadcast. Big question on everybody's mind, everybody that has school-age children, is when will schools reopen, and will the schools open this year? Dr. April, I'll let you start.
Thank you very much, Mary. And no question, that's a topic that weighs heavily on every community member, every parent's mind, every student's mind, every teacher's mind, ours as administrators. We will get back to in-person education. The variable is time. We had a plan first semester to do that. We actually got some students back on a small scale basis and on a limited schedule, and then COVID numbers really started to increase rapidly, and we had to back off and pause not only for that group but other timelines that we had for other groups. Beginning our third quarter, which our first semester will end January 15th, we have some tentative plans that we have put together. We hope to announce those January 11th on dates and groups coming back, if not a little bit sooner. We would just like to see what the metrics related to COVID say coming out of winter break and out of New Year's, and just give it a little bit more time. We hate to put people in the position of announcing and then having to adjust and maybe adjust some more. Hopefully it will not be that way. We just like to keep ours very slow, deliberate, but we will be coming out with more information.
Great, thank you. Ms. Kender?
Yes, we have a very similar experience as our neighbor Plainfield with being a large unit district. We also had the experience of having special programs on site and beginning transitions for hybrid learning. And then, like Plainfield, had the same situation occur with the community health metrics increasing, cases in the district increasing. So we also were in the position to take a pause for an extended period of time for remote learning. So we also are very anxious to be back together on site, but we also know that we have to keep safety first and foremost in mind, and that we have to work and be very intentional about the next time we transition. We've communicated to our community that we have a tentative plan to transition at each level beginning for second semester. So students after break will continue with remote learning for 2 more weeks. And then we have target dates set for each level to begin to transition onto hybrid learning for those who selected it. So like Plainfield, we will continue to monitor the metrics and get to a point where we're able to transition to hybrid learning, which we certainly all want. We know students are longing to come back. We want them back with us. Our staff wants them back, and parents are more than ready for it for those families that are selecting hybrid for their kids. So we're working toward it for sure.
Great. It's good to hear. For those of you that are commenting, if you could please in your comment specify if this is for the Valley View School District or the Plainfield School District, as both of them are somewhat different, so we can address your questions to the proper school. Let's see. How was the use of technology impacted learning this year? How did the district's plan prepare you for remote learning, and how else did you need to evolve? So I will leave that open to whomever would like to respond.
Sure. We were a one-to-one district prior to having to go into an emergency mode in remote learning last spring. So that was very helpful that students had devices, and we had the foresight in our district plans and support of the board to be one-to-one fully for middle and high school. And at elementary school, we had devices. Students were not yet accustomed to taking them home, so we had to make that adjustment. And then we also had to get devices for our littlest learners in pre-K through grades 2, so we had to make that adjustment. And then we had to take what we were accustomed to with the learning platforms and then very quickly adapt. Elementary had a big learning curve, but with a lot of support and a lot of time and patience, we were able to do that. And make that adjustment, and our teachers made huge changes to just make it all work and come together along with the support of our technology team. And connectivity was another thing that we had to ensure that our kids were connected, and if they did not have reliable internet, that we were able to connect them with the service or provide a portable MiFi device and make sure that they had the tools they needed, the devices and the connectivity. So we had a solid base in place, and so it was a matter of just continuing to adapt and evolve and become very savvy at Zoom and other ways to connect. And it's definitely continuing to learn every day, but we've grown huge since last spring.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any other?
Our experience is very similar to what Rachel described at Valley View, and I'm going to ask Dr. Wood in a minute or two to fill in some of the blanks that I missed. But we had much of the same experience as Rachel described. One of the things, timing in life is everything. Fortunately for us, previous to the pandemic, at the beginning of last school year, we had hired a district-level position, Director of Technology and Innovation for Curriculum. And so Laura Weed filled that position from within our district, and she was able to, in her first year, when the pandemic hit, transition from working with teachers on technology in their buildings to being able to put a professional development plan that helped get through the end of last year on e-learning, or what some people might call emergency learning, and then over the summer, with the willingness of our teachers and staff who did a fantastic job making remote learning, virtual learning, e-learning, whatever term you want to use, better than anybody really could have imagined, at least at that time. We were a one-to-one district as far as not having students, which many people think is one-to-one, their definition of taking laptops back and forth to home, to school, to home, to school. We were more one-to-one in our buildings, or 1-to-2 within our buildings. So at the end of, or when COVID really broke out last year and in March, we had enough laptops within our buildings at the high schools and middle schools to be able to deploy those to students and parents needing those. Then over the summer, we were able to expand that to fill in the gaps with the elementary students. So currently now, everyone that has needed a laptop to work from home does have one. Dr. Wood, could you expand a little bit further on what I missed or didn't say?
Sure, just to echo what Dr. Abril had said, is we had a plan to continue to increase our device ratio between students and computers. We have done that. At the same time, we weren't one-to-one like Valley View, and so over the summer we deployed about 26,000 machines to our students. Had to provide professional development for teachers, for parents, and for students, in addition to the infrastructure components that Dr. Kender had mentioned, wireless access for families, and just using the software and the systems that are there. And very grateful for the patience and perseverance, not only of our teachers, but our parents and our students as they learn new systems to make remote learning really very successful. And as we continue to work through remote learning, our challenge is to really attract, work with students who are not engaged in remote learning or who don't check in as often as we are. And so we've created things to make our remote learning model better. Each quarter we've increased our expectations for students and for staff because we do think that this remote learning moving forward even or whether it's a hybrid or a blended version. You know, students and staff and parents are going to have to use technology to create the best model that we can.
And one thing to add to that, and I don't want to speak for Rachel, but she has probably observed, or in Valley View they have observed the same things. I do believe there is a certain segment of our student population and or parent population who are thriving in remote learning, and if in the future are given opportunities to pursue that, either part-time in attendance physically in a building and then working also remotely, or maybe looking at a district curriculum that is only remote. I think there's a certain segment of students that thrive in that and benefit in that. If you look at some of the problem areas that schools typically have when they're in person for attendance, we haven't kind of had some of those. We haven't had nearly the reports of bullying or antisocial behaviors. Student discipline is down. A little bit surprisingly to most of us, like old timers like me who've been in it 35 years of education, I could have never told you what our teachers have told me, and our statistics tell you now, that our attendance for remote learning is better percentage-wise than when students and staff are in buildings. I never could have predicted that, and after 35 years I should have all the answers. So I do believe trying to look for silver linings, all of us in education are going to be re-looking at how we deliver teaching and learning to our students.
All right, very good. Just to let our viewers know that we were all in agreement that masks needed to be worn for this. So with that, some of you have lower voices than others, so you're not projecting well.
Okay.
So we just need to project. Yeah. Dr. Preskavage, we do have a question that is for you. My son is 17 and a junior, is scheduled to start driver's ed. What is the game plan for that, and what does he need to do? He needs to do.
So we'll be communicating with the families our plan. We obviously have a plan, and driver's ed at this point is a go. But everything can change tomorrow. But as of now, yeah, continue as we were. Might be a little modified, but our students will continue with driver's ed.
Good. Well, that's good to know. Mm-hmm. We all need extra drivers in the house to go run our errands for us, right? Next question. How has social media played a role in your communications and your community relations? That's a big one, right? Because I think social media has impacted all of our lives, from those working from home to those who have extra time because they're not working. So definitely social media is on the uptake. What kind of effect, if any, has that had on you and the district?
Well, it's social media has been primary form of communication. It's really, it's the challenge is keeping that community and connection and just ensuring that there's solid communication with the community. So we rely heavily on all forms of social media to keep that connection and to try to continue to maintain a community, because it's so hard that we don't have our typical ways of in-person connection and community. So it's been so important for us, and so many of us staff and students have to become very adept in many different modes of communication. So it's been very, very important to connect with our entire community.
And Mary, if I could add to that, from the building perspective, I think something that with every crisis there's an opportunity, right? And I think this crisis created opportunities where, especially in our district, at a building of our size at BHS with around 3,400 students, it was awesome to have a central message from Ms. Kender that went to all buildings, and everyone could watch that. Because I think back in the day it would have been a lot different, because each building would have been given these independent messages. So the social media allowed that one platform, that one spot, that one voice to create consistency. And I think that's something Valley View did very well during this crisis.
And I would concur with everything that our friends and neighbors from Valley View have said. I think one of the frustrating things that Jason really hit on was one message, and it seems like kind of throughout this pandemic, whether it's at the federal, state, or even sometimes the local level, different messages keep going out, or everybody's kind of left to decide, even at the school district level, We have, give or take, 853 school districts in the state of Illinois, and sometimes it seems like there's 853 plans. We have 50 states, you know, obviously in the United States, and sometimes it seems like there's 50 plans for lockdowns, mitigations, whatever you want to call them, and even the distribution of the vaccine, it seems. So, yes, one central message is absolutely critical. In Plainfield, a huge shout out I need to give to our Director of Community Relations, Tom Hernandez, and also his staff, Linda Taylor and Alyssa Groh, for expanding the use. It's not only just the old time automated phone call that Tom Hernandez sends out, whether it's Facebook, Twitter. I can't even keep track of what other social platforms we get those messages out also for community and parents. It certainly does a heck of a lot of good to try to keep everyone on the same page. The instantaneousness of social media sometimes takes things in not so positive direction, but trying to stick to a same central message is very helpful. Absolutely.
Very good. Thank you. Next question. What changes have you seen in the social emotional aspect of learning this year? And what resources have you made available to students, staff, and their families?
I'll start from the building perspective on that. Two things that we've really tried to center around, Mayor Basta, is we have to have patience, right? When these kids come back. They've been out since March. So this transition, as families are going to have to be empathetic, educators are going to have to be empathetic, we're going to have to be patient with our children. Because there have been a number of changes for them, right? They missed out on, some of them missed out on homecoming and prom and like all those things that were so important to them. And we got to remember that weighs heavily on them. So I think as we get back, it's just taking those baby steps. Like we started our transition plan and we started with seniors for no reason, but I believe our seniors need to be back. We believe they need to be back, right? They need that experience of being a senior in high school because that's going to propel them through life. So for us, it's just about with the social emotional of the kids is being understanding, being empathetic, being patient with them, because there are going to be changes. Mm-hmm. And for us to think they're just going to come back and it's going to be like it was in March, I think that'd be a great mistake.
Yeah, and the teams at our buildings have done such a great job of trying to modify and adapt every way that they would normally support students in school with social emotional needs or resources. And so connecting with them through a one-on-one, virtual meeting, or doing home visits, or connecting them with community resources has been just so critical to help our students and our families too, because there's so many stressors during this pandemic for families, from unemployment to financial concerns to health concerns. So we've really, leaned on our teams in all of our buildings. Our community partners as well have been phenomenal. And we've just been able to connect our families to resources, and we continue to, take that approach because we know that there's a lot of needs that our students and our families have, and our staff as well, because everyone is, as an adult, you're managing so much in the home with your family, with your work, and so it's definitely taken a toll on many, many, many ways. So it's really important, that partnership and ensuring that we're looking at this very holistically and practically in terms of what the needs are.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. Next, and this is a question that comes up, I'm sure, often, and as a parent, I probably have the same question, is how has your district continued to advance quality work in spite of the challenges of the pandemic? And that's like, how do I know that the education that my kids are getting online is equal to that they would have received by being there physically in class? How do you gauge the learning?
Go ahead, Dr. Wood.
I can address that. What we found during the pandemic is, since it's not in person, the work and the assignments that our teachers give really do measure students' ability, whether they understand the concept or not. And so really, it's we've noticed, students' grades, we think, are reflective of really the content that's there. Now, they do have outside resources that they can use at times for that, but the work that our teachers have assigned and the work that our students have completed really, I think, ties into exactly what their knowledge is, where sometimes in person you have some relationship pieces that are there that are not strictly content-based. And so we do think we're assessing what our kids are learning, The challenge is in the remote environment is when you're in person, you can redirect students' behavior and you can provide interventions real time. But in the remote environment, it's much more difficult to do that. So they push content, but we do assess the content. It's more the supports for those students who are not getting it that continues to be our challenge.
And I would just add to that very briefly, and Dr. Wood is our Associate Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, and his background is heavily in curriculum and instruction. I couldn't agree more with what Glenn has said. I will say that sometimes some people think we should just take the number of hours that a student was in a classroom in person, move that over to a computer, and that's the exact number of minutes and hours that a student should spend in front of a monitor. Well, you know, I know myself spending enough time on Zoom meetings, how that is pretty tough maybe for a adolescent to stay exactly that number of minutes on point as they might be in a classroom, and it's just different, and there has to be some push and pull back and forth and allowances made. At the same time, getting students to advance academically as they would, and maybe it's not, you know, the teacher makes the classroom come alive, no question about it. Again, if I've learned anything over 35 years, that teacher makes the curriculum come alive and the classroom come alive. Now they're needing to do it in another venue or another platform, which is remotely. It can be done. It takes a lot of work on everybody's part, but it can be done.
Great, thank you very much. Dr. Paskevich, this one is for you. And any parents who have athletes in the high school, and this is where there's scouting opportunities, and they're missing out on this. So other than they're missing out on the prom, and they're missing out on the graduation, but now let's take it an extra layer and say the sports and the activities related to not just athletic sports, maybe other clubs as well, but predominantly to those parents who say, this is really impacting my child's ability to be seen by a scout.
Well, we haven't missed prom yet this year or graduation, so we are very hopeful that that is going to happen. As a high school and college athlete myself, that's been one of the most difficult things for me as a principal, is to see our kids not doing what they love in the classroom and outside of the classroom. And I have kids reach out to me daily about both of those things. When are we coming back? When can we do this? I see the NBA players doing it on TV. I see the NFL. Why aren't we doing it? Other states are doing it. And that has been one of the hardest things for me to navigate as a principal, because we want the kids back competing when safe to do so. When they tell us it's safe and when we can do it, we're going to do it right away. Right? It's going to be the first thing for us. Our plays, our musicals, we've been trying to do remote. We've done as many activities as we possibly can remote. We've done as many sports as we possibly can do remote. But as Lane said, you can't replace that person to person. You can't replace that teacher. You can't replace that coach, that face to face. And for us, sports are it's imperative at the high school level. It's something that we need to do when safe to do so.
Yeah, sure. We're waiting to hear from the IHSA, the Illinois High School Sports Association. They're projecting to have an upcoming meeting in the next couple weeks with the Illinois Department of Public Health, and hopefully have us a decision on winter sports season and then what that might look like for spring. So we're as anxious as everyone else is, and we certainly are, hopeful that we will be able to bring that back for our kids.
Great.
In Mayor-Basta, we still have coaches. We're still running workouts for kids individually, or a couple kids when allowed to do so, where the college coaches can come in and see the kids if they're prospective Division I or NAIA or whatever college athletes. So I think that hasn't completely stopped. It's just been the competitive aspect of many of them, where they're playing other schools, having full practices. That's definitely slowed.
All right. Question from online. Will the kids be required to take the vaccine when it is available? And again, I think we're having mic issues for the front too, so we'll take it from there, but just into your mic. But that's the question. Will they be required when a vaccine is available?
I'll jump in first. And I am a doctor, but the wrong kind of doctor for this type of question or assurances. Right now, there is no requirement for a vaccine amongst students, obviously. There's not even a requirement for a vaccine amongst staff or anyone who works in a school building. It doesn't appear that requirements are trending or going to go that way for either one. What some people are not clear on, yes, in the state of Illinois and many states, there are certain vaccines that are required for certain diseases. Those are prescribed and come into code when they are passed into law by the Illinois General Assembly. That I'm aware of, a governor has not just been able, or a school superintendent or a mayor, been able to unilaterally dictate that that happens. I would anticipate at some point here the vaccine is going to be made available to students and their parents. There's been limited trials, from my understanding, with individuals or adolescents under the age of 18. Not nearly the research that has been done on quote-unquote adults. For our staff, we are hoping that they will get the vaccine at this point in time. We'll discuss with our teachers and teacher association and our professional state association whether that becomes mandatory or not. I think it would go a long way, certainly, to making the environment safer, and the confidence I have let our Will County Health Department know, which is, you know, primarily obviously where Plainfield School District is located, although we do get a small section of Kendall County. As far as if it would help with public relations or anything, confidence, I would be happy as the superintendent of the largest school district in Will County enrollment-wise and the largest school district in Will County employment-wise to be the first one when it comes time for educators, if that would help. So I'm a big believer in the vaccine, and hopefully that will continue being distributed, and educators will be the next group coming in.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Any follow-up to that, or is that pretty
No, I think Dr. Averill covered everything. We stay in regular communication with the Will County Health Department, so as they are getting a supply in, they are, you know, modifying their distribution plan. Obviously, they're with those healthcare workers in congregate settings first. We expect school staff, our school nurses, to be coming soon on the list. So it's just another step forward in kind of moving through this pandemic and trying to reestablish some normalcy in our schools. So I'm also very optimistic. I'm also very hopeful. And so we are staying connected to ensure that when that time comes, we'll be ready and we'll support that effort in whatever way we can. And then when students have the option and the availability for the vaccine as well, which we anticipate will be much farther into 2021, but that we will continue the same process of working with our community health partners and at the state level to ensure that we make this available to our students and our families.
Great, thank you. Buildings, what do your facilities currently look like? And for you, Dr. Averill, specifically, I know that you have another elementary school that's under construction. So what is it? Is it empty? Is it vacant? Are there teachers? Are there staff? You know, what does the building look like today?
Sure, and quickly, in District 202, we don't have students, obviously, currently in our buildings. Our staff does report to a certain extent. And we have, as many other districts have taken to putting, you know, dots on the floor or markings for reminding students and staff of social distancing, and working on making stairwells or hallways maybe one way and all those types of things. Again, trying to look for silver linings, the lack of in-person attendance has given us a chance to do a lot of projects within the building on maintenance and that type of stuff that needed to be done. Thank you for mentioning the new building, elementary building that we are constructing. That's going to allow us, for the first time ever in 98 years of District 202, actually more than that, it's about 128 years of District 202, to be able to offer full-day kindergarten for every eligible student in the district. That was part of the large part of the motivation to build that new elementary building, which is going to be near the Avery YMCA in Plainfield. We're very excited about that. And absent of a pandemic, that's what it would be on everybody's mind, but that's kind of become a little bit of an afterthought with the pandemic, first and foremost.
Right?
Yeah, just like every support staff in our district, our building, maintenance, operations, facility staff have done a great job ensuring our buildings are ready, from ensuring the physical space in the classrooms are distanced, that we have modular plexiglass barriers for those high contact areas, that we've thought about the flow and all of those other health considerations, installation of HEPA air filtration systems in the nurse's office and waiting areas, just to do everything that we possibly can to be prepared. So the team has, you know, of course, done their part to ensure that we're ready, and we're ready to have students fully back on site. We do have staff in our buildings, in our district office, and you know, for a period in time, we had small numbers of students back. So we learned a lot through that process, and that's allowed us to adapt to be ready for even greater groups. And so right now the staff is on site as needed or as their, you know, job is required, and then of course we'll all be transitioning fully back second semester.
Well, that's good to hear. Many of those who have commented just in gatherings or whether it's on social media or somewhere else say that the students, the children, young and old alike, so whether you're in elementary school or you're in high school, they're missing their social interaction. They're missing being with their friends. They're missing the lunchroom and the cafeteria and the playgrounds. When we do go back, what is that going to look like? Are we back to the same old, or are there going to be major differences, and is it going to be as exciting as the perception that we all have of our kids getting back to normal? Everything is back. So what is that going to look like? What does lunch look like? What does PE look like?
So at our school, when we come back, we're going to treat it as the first day of school like we do every year. Right? It's going to be the first time that they're really all going to be back. We're going to transition, but when we get all 4 levels back, it's going to be about the reteaching. It's going to be about the relearning. It's going to be about being empathetic with our kids. Because to just assume that our kids are going to be like they were in March of last year when they return this year, I think that's something we need to be very careful with. So we need to be very strategic with this. We need to make sure that we're caring, because those kids, they want to be back, but there's a big transition for them. And I want parents to know that when they come back, we're going to work as hard as we possibly can to get it back to normal, but give us time and be patient for it to get back to normal.
Yeah, huge adjustments for everyone. Our kids have been just amazing in their ability to adapt and be flexible and learn new things and kind of just go with the flow. They've been incredibly resilient. And so sometimes it's more difficult for us adults to accept changes and to adapt and modify, but our kids show us time and time again that they come along with the change and make the best of it. And I truly believe that our kids will be happy to be back despite the modifications of lunch or despite the modifications of playground, you know, and recess or physical education. They'll be happy. It may not be the ideal, what they want or what they would prefer, but I know they will just be happy to be back, and we will do our best to modify and make the best of it. And I know our kids will rise to the occasion like they always do and adapt and help make it work. And that's really what it's going to take. It's going to take us as adults, staff and parents, and our kids working together to ensure that we come back together and that we are able to stay in session, stay in school in person once we are back, and that we're all doing our part to ensure that we're being safe as possible with distancing, with the wearing of masks, with hand hygiene, and every other precaution that we can take to keep transmission low and keep that risk low and keep our kids in school where they belong.
You brought up a very interesting point with the supplies and the requirements of what schools will need in order to go back to in-person. And with that, what does the future of school funding look like?
Well, that's a wow.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Well, you have people that say, well, my kids aren't there. Why am I paying taxes? I'm not using the building. The lights aren't on. So what does that look like? But, to those, tell us a little bit about the extra expenses, the added expenses, and everything that goes with it. What do we look like?
Sure, and I'll lead off first,
Sure.
and that's a great question. I don't know that you have enough time for me to get back to you or us to get back to you with a real accurate answer. The crystal ball on school funding is a little cloudy. In random order, and most recently, obviously, a stimulus package coming out of Congress is hopefully going to have some monies in there to benefit schools for kind of the hole that's been blown in our budget, and probably Valley View's too, and local municipalities to some extent, regarding the buying of plenty of hand sanitizer, of the masks. Early on, we were told that, you know, gloves were going to be needed, and supplies of all of those extra equipment for nurses, and the extra requirements that on the sanitizer of rooms that our custodians are going to be using, and all those types of things. As far as funding from the state, with the non-passage of the fair tax, the last election, it appears that there's going to be some pretty significant cuts coming out of Springfield that no doubt will affect schools and, again, local municipalities or any government taxing body, and we're going to have to weather that storm. Yes, I do get inquiries from time to time from people who don't think they should pay any taxes because of remote learning. Well, I suppose in some ways that makes some sense. However, we have a contract, collective bargaining agreement with our teachers and certified staff to deliver a product, which is teaching and education. The product right now has not been in a classroom physically, it's been remotely. So we have to fulfill those expenses. We still have to heat the buildings, or if it's other weather, keep it at a moderate temperature, or air condition the buildings and those things. That still costs money. So it's not like there is just absolutely no activity going on in the buildings, and we have suddenly, I can assure you we don't, maybe Valley View does, a surplus of money. One thing that has been of assistance for us, and probably Valley View or any school district who's been majority remote, has been that the expenses on substitutes have not been quite what they were. Teachers who normally are staff who would have had to stay at home because of maybe a flu or something related, they've been able to teach from home and still deliver a lesson and education.
Yeah, it's I guess kind of the same story that has been in education for a long time. We're going to be expected to do a lot more with a lot less, and so we don't yet know with the state funding picture how that's going to impact schools or particular districts. So we're preparing for the worst, of course, but at the same time we have to remain fully operational despite our delivery of instruction, and right now it happens to be remote. But we need to ensure that full operations are running and that we are prepared for whatever comes our way. So during the time of COVID, there has been additional resources, grant funding, federal CARES dollars that have come to school districts to support the purchase of additional PPE or technology advancements and upgrades and things like that, so that we've been able to adapt. And then, of course, we are extremely reliant as a school funding model in Illinois on that local tax base, So we recognize that, that is a burden for our families, but we've been grateful and very fortunate that the tax collections are almost at the same point that they were this time last year. So that's huge kudos to our entire community and our tax base, because we really are so reliant on that. And yes, we have to keep our full staff, and yes, we have to have full programs in place for our kids. So it's really critical, and we don't yet know what the future will hold with that federal stimulus package or with the state budget. But we are going to adapt and be prepared. And we've been here before. We've had really tough times before, and we've continued to work through and still grow, and still be there for our kids, and still support our staff. So we're going to continue to do that, despite this.
Thank you very much. And I know, and I've seen it, that you have parent groups. That's what I know, that you have a parent group that, I don't want to call it advisory, but maybe that's a good name for it, of where you're soliciting feedback from the parents, you're soliciting feedback from the community, and different people have different concerns. My kindergarten child is way different than my high school senior. And I know that when I attend some of those, I think about it as it relates to me as a person, and sometimes take away the fact that, I'm in this section, but there are others that are in different areas, and different needs and different requirements. And that's got to be very difficult for you when communicating and also when making decisions, because you have such a wide scope. There's never going to be a one-size-fits-all. With that, if you'd like to make some closing remarks to our viewers, Dr. Wood, I'll start with you.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to be here at the Bolingbrook Village Hall. Really pleased with our remote learning model, even though it's not the desired model of the community. A lot of people have seen it a number of times. Our goal with remote learning is to create a consistent experience for our families and they have. They've done very well with that. We continue to move forward in the future and implementing our hybrid model and then back to full in person. We look forward to getting feedback from our parent groups, our focus groups, students, staff, and community members.
Dr. Pascavage?
Just like to say thank you, and I appreciate all of you that tuned in today. Just know that we are as eager to return as your students are, and we know you are eager to get your students to return. I'd like to say thank you to all the teachers, staff, families, administrators, and everyone that's done everything they can to make this as meaningful and purposeful as possible. Thank you.
Before, we did have one other question that comes in that says, what about the kids who cannot wear masks due to medical issues? Are there any recommendations on how we will go about that if masks are required when we go back?
And certainly I'll jump in. As long as we receive, and it would work through our student services department at the district office, and our assistant sup for student services is Mrs. Mina Griffith, and then also our coordinator of nursing. If we receive medical documentation that a student just simply cannot wear a mask, we certainly work with them to see what we can do for in-person if that parent requests in-person. Many times, those situations, the student also has some other immunocompromised health issues, and the parent may not select to return them to in-person and may decide to continue remote. But if there are those situations, and certainly we have 26,000 give or take students, there will be a situation like that. If those individuals will contact Mrs. Griffith at the district office, we'll work something out with them for sure.
Yeah, we have of course, a similar process for the medical exemption for mask wearing. So that's through a doctor's order and documentation, and there's a process for that. For some of our littlest learners, we have an accompanying plan with that to build tolerance to the mask wearing and to get them accustomed to that. Some of the students in our special programs have sensory concerns that it's an issue. So we do everything possible. Our student services team works through that process with the parents and the family's medical doctor and ensures that that child is supported. And of course, remote learning for those children that have major health concerns or immune-compromised children would continue to receive full supports remotely. So there's a process in place, and we handle it like everything as an individual issue and an individual need. So that's how we would support.
And one last thing on that. Our experiences, at least mine, networking with other superintendents in other districts or other administrators. In District 202, we've visited, or in the fall, early fall, we visited 3 different school districts, Yorkville, Lake Zurich, which are both unit districts, semi-large unit districts, and then also an elementary district. Cass Elementary District not far away, and everyone from teachers to administrators on those site visits or networking that I've done, the folks at those sites or those schools or who I talk to say that students are not an issue at all with compliance on masks. Staff too, but everyone thinks that students just sometimes can't control themselves. They won't wear their mask. At the high school level maybe, or middle school level, there might be a little bit more not willing to go with the rules or whatever. We have not found that in anyone that we've talked to. In fact, the exact opposite.
Good. Ms. Kender, do you want to do some closing remarks?
Absolutely. I would echo many of the things that Dr. Wood and Dr. Pascavage had said. Just incredibly grateful and proud of our entire community. I always look for silver linings, and I always want to, see what we can learn from this. And what I know that as a community, we've come together and we've gotten through this together and made the absolute best of it we possibly could. And I'm incredibly proud of our kids for being resilient and continuing to show up and do their absolute best, even though it's not what it should be for our kids. We should have them with us and be able to have them in person. Our parents, our families, our staff, the leaders in our district, all of our community partners, we've really just come together to figure out a way to make this work, make the best of it, learn from it, and build upon it going forward. And so that's what I hope that we remember when, you know, we look back at this, and we will take a lot of the lessons learned and we'll be better because of it. So I'm incredibly grateful and proud, and just excited to move into a new year, put this year behind us, and continue to grow. So thank you, and thank you for this opportunity, Mayor Basta. I really appreciate it.
Dr. April?
Well, there's not really much more to add than what my colleagues here have said. I mean, we've enjoyed, since I've been in Plainfield, and even before that when I was a building principal way back when at Plainfield High School, we've always had a good relationship with Valley View schools. You know, Jim Mitchum previously to Rachel, certainly he and I worked together, but the crisis that's happened, I think, has had us communicating more, trading ideas, and then all the superintendents, at least in Will County and statewide, trying to come up with the best plan for their community, but also that fit within the parameters that we're being given, as you know, from the top down, so to speak. But most certainly we want to be back in in-person education. 35 years ago when I started, there was no thought of anything other that would be different than in-person education. You know, now we have to take those lessons and maybe think a little bit into the future of what model is the best, and are there learners that are serviced better by somewhat of a remote or maybe a full remote experience. But we want to get back. We will get back. I am cautiously optimistic that we are going to get back, and it's going to be very, very soon.
Well, thank you very much again for joining us and all of your efforts that you've put forth so far during this pandemic. I also want to extend our thanks and gratitude to the teachers and staff for adapting to this year and making things work. This will be our last Community Matters episode for the year 2020. I look forward to seeing you all in the new year. 2021 has many episodes ahead of us of Community Matters, matters that matter to you, our community. Stay safe, happy holiday, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.